Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the sinking of the Moskva warship. This is a Russian warship. It was in the Black Sea. There are different ideas about why it has sunk, and there's an important question to be asked because some people are saying, well, this ship may have had nuclear weapons aboard. Now, first and foremost, before I get into the sum and substance of the analysis here, I've got some hunches about the situation, but we'll get into that. Keep in mind down below, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind that I make exclusive content every single day on those platforms that doesn't go on YouTube. Sorry, dad brain kicking in there for a minute. Sleep, tolerable, nominal levels of sleep. I'm an insomniac, so don't worry, I can deal with a little bit of sleep deprivation because I've been dealing with it for more than 20 years. However, remember that video uploads will be scattered a little bit, a little more sporadic for some time because, of course, just had a kid. First and foremost, as far as the nuclear question, were there nukes aboard this ship that got sunk? Is arguably more important a question than why and how it sunk. I'm saying I'm skeptical that there would be nukes aboard. I'll tell you why. While it's possible, it's feasible, Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons. Think about the ramifications of the Ukraine war itself. Russia is in combat against a nation that does not have nuclear capabilities. In fact, is one of only a few countries in the world that ever had nukes and relinquished them, supposedly in part to prevent exactly the scenario the poor Ukrainians are currently in. If you're fighting a non-nuclear state and the other nuclear powers have either sided with you, like China, or are completely neutral, like India, Pakistan, or they're part of NATO, and they've said, we're not getting directly involved. There's no reason to get directly involved. Ukraine's not a NATO state or anything like that. If you don't have to worry about being invaded, and you don't have to worry about being nuked, why would you send into the Black Sea a ship loaded with nuclear weapons, would be my question. I'm skeptical that there would be nukes aboard. I could be wrong, but there'd be no reason to field a ship full of nukes in the Black Sea in an area where it's potentially going to come under enemy fire when there's no real legitimate reason why you would ever use the nukes. You're not going to nuke a non-nuclear state. Even your closest allies would abandon you if you did that. It'd be universally condemned, so that wouldn't be the purpose. NATO is not directly involved, is going out of its way to try not to inflame the situation, with the exception of Biden and to an extent the Germans at this point. Why would you field the nukes? There's no point to them. You're not going to use them unless you. Although Russia is saying, hey, if some of these other states on the margins of our border join NATO or whatever, we might put nukes up in the Baltics. Not that it really makes any difference because of mutually assured destruction, but I don't really care, by the way, where the Russians put their nukes. I don't care if they put them all in the middle of Siberia. I don't care if they take every nuke and put it right on the border of Eastern Europe within a short firing distance of NATO troops if necessary. Having nuclear weapons is a given. Having them positioned strategically is a given. We've done this before. We went through 50 years of Cold War prior. It never really ended. But so as far as the nuclear question, I'd say it's unlikely. There's a chance Putin might have had a couple of nukes aboard and they're like, we don't have time to offload them. The ship has to sail tomorrow. Just fucking leave the nukes in the back. That's possible. Now, as to the question of how this ship was sunk. The Ukrainians immediately claimed that they downed the ship. They said that they hit it with a missile. Of course, it lit the ammunition on fire and it blew up, and now it's at the bottom of the Black Sea. I'll tell you why there's some reason to believe that's actually the case. Some group of partisan Ukrainians near the shoreline scored a lucky hit, effectively. Number one, the technology's there. You've got tech now from basically all of Western Europe, the United States, etc., flooding into Ukraine. They have the military capability. They have the technology necessary to do what was done here. Secondly, because the Russians, instead of immediately coming out and saying, well, it was just an electrical fire and it spread to the ammunition storage and it blew up and, it's really sad and we mourn for our dead sailors, they're doing the obfuscation game and saying, well, jury's still out. We're not exactly sure what happened here. We've got to investigate. Now, the Black Sea in that area is an active war zone. You're not going to do much investigation. What are you going to do? You're going to send another ship out to an area where a much larger ship was just destroyed to send scuba divers down to the wreckage in the middle of fighting in a contested zone where there are other naval players currently. I don't think that's likely to happen. That being said, of course, the West isn't going to be able to investigate. There's probably going to be no independent verification during the entire conflict. It'll be one of those cases where 15, 20 years from now, the next Leonard Nimoy will be doing an In Search Of episode and we'll find out the secrets of the sinking of the Moskva. There'll probably be documentaries and stuff about it. It's a major naval loss. Large naval ships, because the major players of the world haven't been in direct conflict for a while. Since the late Cold War, effectively, and in some cases the conflicts are inland. You don't really have a naval thing going on. You haven't had a huge amount of naval combat. Mostly, the major navies of the world combat pirates or insurgent groups around the world, Russia included. It's definitely significant. And there's reason to believe that the Ukrainians scored a hit here. I would say there's a better than 50-50 chance of that. But there's always the possibility that it's just the Ukrainians trying to demoralize the Russians. Hey, look, we can sink some of your more advanced warships, so you can't get too close to the coast. AKA landing those troops. Those dudes are going to be a little bit more frightened when they're doing their landing from Crimea or something like that. Could be. As far as the nuclear question, though, I'm seeing so many mixed messages from legacy media. Some of the reporting on it as well. A ship carrying nuclear weapons just got destroyed in the Black Sea, and so now there are a dozen nukes down there capable of causing a massive, massive explosion because people don't understand how nukes work, so they think that the fact that they're sitting there makes them primed and ready to go necessarily. And it'll wipe out all the coastal regions in the Black Sea, or it'll irradiate everything. There'll be a big glowing cloud coming out of it. Again, people that don't understand nuclear technology, I think to an extent, it's possible. It'd be really unfortunate if that were the case. I suppose what you'd have to do is take radiation readings. Of course, after that catastrophic explosion, you would expect the possibility that some of that nuclear material is going to leak into the water in that area. That will give you proof positive if that's the case. And of course, over time, the weapons would decay anyway. I'd like to point out to people that at some point a nuclear weapon degrades to the point of uselessness because it has to have a certain amount of actual nuclear mass in order to go critical in the first place. It could happen. The other possibility is that the Russians will use the strategic ambiguity doctrine effectively and say, well, we're not going to disclose whether there were nukes aboard, so that maybe the Ukrainians actually are more reluctant to fire on the Russian ships, worried about the possibility of setting off a nuclear detonation. Again, not really the way it will generally work, although stranger things have happened. By the way, there was one time, I think it was a B-52 bomber accidentally let go of a nuclear weapon in North Carolina, actually, doing a regular sortie. And there was only one safety left on that prevented it from blowing up with, I believe, 3 megatons of blast over a populated area. So yes, we've had some close calls, and it is, I think, only a matter of time before some sort of accidental nuclear event happens. May or may not be actually an accident. This could have been sabotaged by a Russian soldier, for all we know. That's possible. But this probably, thankfully, will not actually result in that. As far as who done it, was it an electrical fire? Renegade soldier says, screw this, I'm going to scuttle the ship because they're anti-war or something. The Ukrainians did it. The CIA did it. I'm sure you'll be getting the, hey, glowing people, shot it with a drone or something. There's no way to know. Ambiguity in the fog of war has absorbed virtually all true information at this point, to the point where it's difficult to tell what's going on. When you see so many mixed messages, a virtual non-message from Moscow in this case, we don't know. So unfortunately, there may be some nukes at the bottom of the Black Sea. I think, thankfully, it's not particularly likely, but you're never going to know, or at least during the conflict, certainly, who sunk the Moskva. So, yeah, hundreds of Russian sailors apparently drowned, which makes sense because the explosion was apparently fairly quick. Sad for them. That's unfortunately the nature of war. People dying and people suffering and all of these attendant things that are so nasty, and we can't lose sight of the fact that on all sides there is that suffering. Which is why there shouldn't be war in the first place. War is fucking stupid, really. That's about all. Peace out.